Ready?
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin, I am here.
Oh, something funny's happening. Second. Second.
All right. Right. We're a few minutes late, but good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Leisure Services Committee of the 1st of September. Before we actually go into the agenda, I would just like to welcome the two new councillors to the committee, Councillor Martin Doyle and also Councillor Nada Al-Sanjari, although I can't see her in attendance on my list at the moment.
No, she doesn't seem to be there at the moment.
But welcome to the committee anyway. I'd also, as it's been 8 months since we last had a leisure meeting, and things have changed dramatically, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all the committee, well, all the officers of the council, all the staff of the council for the sterling effort that they have actually put in. I know at times there are just two people looking after all the parks on the groundsman side, and I know Ed has been by himself many times in the leisure centre. But all of them and the volunteers have done massive work for us over the period of lockdown. And I would just like to say thank you very much to each and every one of them. So let's go into the agenda itself. Deborah, do we have any apologies at all?
I can tell you we've got apologies from Councillor Stone and Councillor Ramuni.
Right, thank you. Right, have we got any declarations of interest at all this evening? No? That's fine. Right, we go to the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 14th of January 2020. I hope you've all had the opportunity of reading those minutes. Do we have any comments at all that anyone wants to make? No?
No, I've raised my hand.
Oh, sorry, Alex.
Thank you.
I apologise.
Yes. On 53, any change on Loddon Mead, any progress? Or perhaps that can be taken with Jack, I don't know. And the other...
I think that will be covered, Alex, when Sam gives his report.
Okay. And the other one was, can we have an update on the questionnaire for young people? Obviously it's been held up by COVID, but thankfully they're going back to school now. So do we know if that actually been sent out to them?
Again, I noticed there is comment in Sam Milligan's report on Jack.
No, not the Jack report. I'm talking about the...
I personally have heard nothing about the one that was supposedly done by the Community Youth Partnership.
Right, okay, so we're still waiting to hear on that. Okay.
Are there any further questions at all on those minutes? So as soon as I get the opportunity after this meeting, I will sign those minutes as a true and accurate copy. Moving on to agenda item 4, we come to the report on Just Around the Corner. Perhaps I can invite you, Sam, to present your report, please.
Yeah, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I believe the report was added to the appendix for your meeting. So I'll just roughly go through it really quickly, and then I can, if anybody wants to ask any questions, they can do so. Is that fair enough? Yeah. At the start of COVID, actually, we didn't have a team out as such, as officially, until both for Jack and for Rehoboth, we got an email from the district council, just confirming that we were part of that, an agency that was allowed to keep going as an essential agency to keep going. So then, but we just, while we organised it while doing our own personal walks through Woodley, our own exercise for the time, we just kept an eye on what was going on in the parks. And it was relatively quiet until actually then the restrictions were lifted a bit. And then it did get more busy. But the brilliant thing about it was, I don't know if other people have seen the number of families, especially young families, out having picnics in the park, Woodford Park. It was just amazing to see all that for such a long period of time. And on a Friday night in particular, a group of ladies, I think that was from a primary school, were met together under social distance behind the Memorial Hall, and they were there every Friday night. And the atmosphere in the park was absolutely amazing, I think, over it. And what we've seen also was a bigger increase in, like, I would say, primary school kids, with either one parent or two parents bringing them down and just being there, being at the skate park. And yeah, just enjoying that over the summer and over lockdown. Yeah, and actually then we're able to meet some of the kids that come down from their primary schools around Woodford Park, who come to Jack at other areas or other times when schools would have been in. So it was good to meet up with them when we weren't meeting them through the school avenue. And that was very important. Just then, jumping on, even during lockdown, when we got the email, we were able to go and visit families by taking them food parcels that we had been doing for quite a while. And a big thanks to Bill in particular for loaning us his refrigerator to keep the food fresh and stuff like that for a longer period of time. So we were able to keep contact with vulnerable families over that period of time with kids, and just take them just that extra little bit of sometimes really nice food, sometimes really basic food. But it was just, I don't say we use it as an excuse, but it gave us an opportunity to just go and see families in their own settings and stay at the doorstep and just drop the food off. That was very important through the initial part of lockdown in particular. I heard a question about Loddon Mead. I can't remember the date offhand, but Richard Skegg and myself, probably a little while before lockdown, we walked around Loddon Mead and also the cinema side of Loddon Mead. And Richard and I put together, Richard put a proposal together to send to the management of the cinema complex. I think they're in Nottingham, because Richard used to be an employee, I believe, at one time of the complex down there, a manager. I think he sent that. I'm not sure Robbie, our office, said contacted Richard about a month ago. And he said he had no feedback from the people in Nottingham, from head office for the cinema complex. But on that, before lockdown, we had lots of really good conversation and inroads with the artists that are underneath, who are doing the artwork now on the Loddon Mead side of the river. And that was very important. And what we learned from that time was that when we done the murals at half term, which we hoped we would finish at Easter, which we didn't. We didn't get doing it at Easter. Because we took it, rather than actually doing the murals directly on the columns, we took in boards and done the murals on the boards, which we didn't. This wasn't done deliberately, but we found out by talking to the people that was a good thing, because there was a lot of suspicion from the people using it that we were there on behalf of the police to find out who was doing the artwork. And there was a lot of suspicion of us going in there. And by doing the boards, it sort of said to them, or people were saying on their social media sites, that no, this is a worthy cause, and they're not coming in here to take over. So in hindsight, it was quite good doing the boards and not doing the walls directly. We didn't get all the boards finished, so we took them away, and they're stored at Rehoboth to take back again when the time is when we can get back in to do it. And Colin, who is the main artist, has texted me last week and then saying that they're quite keen to get back in there again when the conditions are right. So yeah, that's sorry, my dogs. That's it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Sam at all on that report? No?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, Martin, I couldn't see your hand. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, who?
Martin, Councillor Doyle. Can you hear me, Councillor Doyle?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Yeah.
No.
Right. Thanks for that, Sam.
Yep.
Couple of questions. You mentioned at the bottom of your report dialogue with Richard Delinsky relating to Loddon Mead. What's that about?
Sorry, that's probably a typo. Actually, it's probably Richard Skegg. But Richard was in the initial times at the first, when we done the art project in half term. Richard's charity with Colin, that's the main artist, was artistic. It was artistic that came and helped the young people do the boards. So that Richard Delinsky, sorry, is a typo. That should be Richard Skegg.
Right.
Okay.
Are there any people using this place in any way?
Yeah, just over this last month, there is more. The people are starting to come back to it. When we done our half-term project, I think we have 12 boards done. So that was 12 groups of young people actually came on that discovery day, if you want to put it that way. So those boards are stacked dry, ready to take back when the conditions are right.
Right. So what you're telling me is there's been a day where 12 groups of people were doing something there. I haven't got an idea. I have no idea I don't know what the boards are. I don't know what they're doing there. I don't understand.
The whole idea is that there'll be, hopefully at some stage or other, we've talked this with Richard Skegg, that is, that we can make a very special place down there. One, be free running, but to actually integrate it with artwork as well. And the whole idea is, initially the Easter one, the hope was that the art department from both Bulmish and Wengel's department would get involved. So the artwork, instead of doing it on the columns, that's probably in hindsight would have upset a lot of people. We've taken in 3 meters by 1.2 boards. So people came and just done their own expression of art, and the artistic guys, we had 4 professional artists there, and they were there just to guide the young people and to suggest, well, if they ask questions, they ask guidance. the artists were there to guide them. And yeah, so that was the idea of it, as a way in, not to upset people, I suppose, but also to gauge and to invite young people there.
Just one more. On your outreach work, do you offer third-party agencies to people to get in touch with, stroke, refer them to any third-party agencies at all?
We work very closely with ARC. That's Paul Cassidy from ARC. We work closely with ARC. So yeah.
So it'd just be ARC.
No, thank you, Councillor Doyle. That's 4 questions you've asked. Councillor
I didn't know
Heath,
there was a limit to the number of questions.
well, I can't let you monopolise the meeting, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm happy to hand over to Alex now.
Last 4. Councillor Heath, did you have any?
Yes, yes, I have. Have you seen any signs of drug activity in Woodley as part of your activities? That's one question. This might be something for next summer now. Would you ever venture to in the new part of the Woodley Airfield development? There are areas which kids frequent on the other side of the old river. That's an area to be considered. And the other thing is very good descriptive coverage of what you do. I wondered, and it's obviously not for tonight, but whether some more numeric information could be supplied. Maybe the number of nights you go out.
Oh yeah, yeah. We normally do.
The hours, the hours. Maybe an indication of how many children you interact with, and also what the outcomes are of when they're referred to Rehoboth, what the outcomes are of that. So, but I come from a finance background, so some numeric information in future I think would be useful.
Sure. I've had a conversation with Deborah last week just about Sanford Farm, because that's one of the areas that we walk through, and we don't go over to the other side of the river, but we've been through that, and I'm just looking for the right diplomatic words. It would be in a state that would cause me to have some red flags, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line. There doesn't seem to be much atmosphere in it. And mostly when you go through there, mostly you'll see parents actually taking their groceries out of the back of the car and into their house. And there's not very many young people we have seen using the play equipment that's in there. So I'm struggling to make sure I get the right words. There's not much atmosphere, community atmosphere in the estate. And it would raise a few red flags for me in years to come. And I've suggested to Deborah that might be a place of focus for some work in the future.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanjari, you were next. You have a question?
Yes, thank you. With regards to, it's always been my concern with regards to outreach. I appreciate you said that you delivered food parcels to families. Obviously, a lot of us have been doing that with COVID, but I know that's not that's kind of a voluntary thing. But in terms of the money that we give to Jack, we've contracted a service level agreement of £29,000 to Jack to do that. Now, my concern is that I know that there are lots of young people who just aren't being seen or have access to kind of external agencies, especially during the COVID crisis, even when they're out of school, sometimes when they're in school, they don't have that. Now, if this is a huge investment at a very difficult time financially, how are we measuring in terms of, at the moment, my concern is that the work that Jack is doing using public money is very anecdotal. I'd like to see something. Can you reassure me in terms of sort of the value added factor of the outreach work that we are commissioning Jack to do, please? Thank you.
Yeah. When there was few people out at the beginning of lockdown and everything got, the food was, I don't want to say it's a byproduct because it was a very important thing, but what it did is it allowed us to contact those families with children who are very vulnerable. So it gave us a way to just stand in the doorstep and talk to the families and to support them and to encourage them through that time. So it was, we've been doing it for quite a while, but it was one of those things that we utilized to help us to get alongside those vulnerable families. And then when the kids start to come out, one of the things that the young people were quite upset about, and this is just from the different schools, the way the schools, especially secondary schools, closed down. They just had a sort of very, very, very short assembly, if you would call it assembly, and the young people were dispersed. And that was it, especially for year 11. So for a couple of Friday nights after that, Sanford Park was really, really busy because the young people just met. And again, we were able to discuss that around the whole thing of safety and yeah, just engage them in that whole way and how they felt about the schools closing and just general conversation like that. And then halfway through, we come across groups on different nights. Actually, there was no rhyme or reason to it. We come across, for example, a large group behind the sports hall, and they were planning to go camping outside the area, which was fenced off when they got there. So they come back to behind the sports hall. And again, the reception, they were very, very polite. They had alcohol, but they weren't intoxicated in any way. They weren't keeping their own social distance or anything like that. They were mixing. But again, it was a fantastic opportunity for us to get alongside them and to see, yeah, how they were dealing with the COVID lockdown and things like that. I would just need to check, actually. I think your figure at what we get at the moment is slightly exaggerated. So I need to check that in the office when I get back at another time.
I'm going by the what was sent out to councillors with regards to our expenditure. Okay. And it put in that Jack for 2021 will be in receipt of £29,000, and that would be paid in quarterly increments.
That's for 2021. That's for next year.
No, 20/21.
Okay.
Chairman.
I'll check that.
You wanted to come in on that?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm that the agreement with Jack for doing the extended year that was agreed last year or earlier this year meant that they stayed on the same amount that they had the year before, and I think it's just over £25,000, not 29.
Okay, thank you very much. But I've still not really had an answer to my question.
No,
about what?
We've got a lot to get through this evening. I've got one other person waiting for a question. I'll let you ask this question, but make this the last one, please.
It's the same question. What are we getting in terms of the payment we're getting? What are the outcomes measured? what kind of robust checks are in place to make sure that this huge amount of money at a very difficult time is being utilised properly to serve the people of Woodley. I appreciate all the anecdotes, but I've had very similar conversations with people as I was doing COVID parcel deliveries and helping out through the local community COVID response groups. But obviously this was all voluntary and I wasn't being paid to do that. So it's really important that we scrutinise the use and of public money. That's our role as councillors. So I'd like, maybe, I don't know, for the next report or for now, it's quite pressing to know how the value for money element is.
Can you ask your question, please, Councillor Stanjani?
Yeah, that's
All right.
it. How,
So what was the question? All right,
how will you, well, okay, I've already asked it, but how are we making sure that the money spent is value for money? What audits are in place beyond anecdotal
that is
evidence,
the
and
Sam,
and what outcomes are measured?
Sorry?
Sam, are you able to answer that question? What benefits are we getting from the money?
Well, we have the service level agreements where we're working to that service level agreement, and we actually put the added value onto that as well. We could actually give a fuller report if that's, yeah, we can break that down more and more.
Right.
And
okay.
And I realize actually the people that we give the food to was people we knew had vulnerable children in their homes. So that was targeted towards vulnerable children and vulnerable families. So it just wasn't willy. It just wasn't willy-nilly.
Right. Well, the last question I will take on this subject is Councillor Swaddle. You had your hand raised.
I'm conscious that we've got a packed agenda. I just wanted to ask Sam if he'd seen through his and his team's work with our local young people, but there has been a rise in domestic violence with, you know, all the pressures that families are under during the pandemic.
Violence, no, we haven't had that. There's more anxiety and things like that, and tensions, but we have no evidence of a rise in domestic violence, but there's certainly a rise in anxiety.
Well, that's good to hear, and thank you very much, Sam, for all that you're doing.
Yeah. That's not to say it's not there. I just want to make that clear. We haven't picked it up.
Right.
But you're watching out and you're ready to help.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you, Sam, very much
Okay.
for your report and for answering those questions. But you're now free to go.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a really good evening, everyone.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Bye-bye.
on to agenda item 5, the budgetary control. And Deborah, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Could you look at page 10 and 11 on in your agenda, and if we start on page 10, which is expenditure, I can talk you through that. Apart from play areas, allotments and youth services, all the budget areas are under 33%, which is what we would expect to see at month 4 of the financial year. Play equipment is only slightly over 33%, and the water and lease costs at the allotments have pushed the percentage to 37.7%, but we pay the lease in 2 parts, so it's just when that falls. Youth services are higher because of the agreement to pay the SLA payments to Jack in advance. I don't know if anyone's got any other questions. We're under what we might normally be. I don't know. Would you like me to move on to income now? Unless there's any questions about expenditure.
Councillor Heap, you've got a question.
Where were the savings made for Woodford Park? 21,000 under the last year. Just wonder where they made those savings.
I don't know, actually. No, I'm not sure. I'd have to have a look at a bit more detail, and I'm afraid I haven't brought that with me, although I think it might be on the printer. No, I don't know.
Okay. Yes, if you
Councillor
could-
Heap, I'll
Yeah.
have a look and I'll let
Thanks.
the committee know. Okay.
Thank you.
Could I possibly, David, could I possibly, Alex, are you looking on page 10 and you see Woodford Park budget 35,992 and then you see your actual expenditure? Is that where you're getting your 21,000 from? Because if it is, the budget is for a full year. The other two numbers are only-
No.
The difference in the actual expenditure compared with last year,
Yeah.
you saved £21,000. Last year was 122.8. This year it's 101.9. So you've actually made savings of 21,000.
Is that partly due to not being open?
I think
during
it might
many
be.
months?
I think some of it will be that, yes. But I won't know until I go and look through the whole detail. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Right. Can we look at the income then, please, Deborah?
Yeah, in terms of income, it's looking rather depressing against last year's income at this point. What I've done on page 11 is show you of the amount of furlough income that we've had in against each of those codes. So we have to put it in as income. So in total, and this is up to the end of June because there's a bit of a delay in claiming the furlough and getting that approved. So this is up to June, and you'll see that we've had total furlough income of £48,412, which means that the income that we've earned in terms of rent, activities and booking halls, and there's not very much of that, was £17,147. Now, I can tell you that the furlough income up to the end of July is estimated to be 59,000 because I spoke to Ash today and we had a look at that. Some of that money needs to go against national insurance and pension, but not very much. So £2,460 of the 59,000 furlough that we actually have received goes against NI and pension. Not very much of it, obviously. At the leisure centre, income from rent, hire of rooms, sports hall activities, 3G pitch and gym income have raised just over 13,000. That's to the end of July, and there will be better news for August. I've had a preview. Where there have been small amounts of room hire at Coronation Hall and Chapel Hall, grass cutting at Bullmarsh Park, football and cricket pitch fees, and plaques at the Garden of Remembrance. So bits and bobs, but certainly at the moment, the leisure centre is heading in the right direction in terms of hoping that we can increase income from our facilities.
Thank you. Councillor Swaddle, I see you have your hand up.
I'm very sorry, my hand just left up from before.
Okay. Councillor Heap, you're first on the list.
Thank you. Yes, I did send you through. I'd done some calculations on what the year-end figure might be. I mean, can I ask, are we creating scenarios? Have we got models where we got an idea of where we're going to end up at the end of the year? Clearly, it's very difficult at this point to make these calculations.
It is.
But I mean, I was quite optimistic, and I come up with a shortfall of 94,000. What concerns?
I don't know how.
yeah. I mean, yeah. Obviously, I made certain assumptions about what what we've had
Yeah.
so far, the fact that furlough is going to finish in October,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
The point is, yeah, I mean, they could be wildly out, but obviously I'd like to know that we have got some modelling going on to try and work out where we're going to be. And can I express my concern? We've had 3 council meetings, full council meetings, since lockdown. We haven't yet had, as far as I can see, any council meeting discussing the worst financial situation obviously this council's ever been in. I wondered, as I say,
Why not?
when are we going to have that? You know, we can't. I mean, the last meeting, frankly, was just rearranging the deck chairs,
Yeah.
and we now want to consider our options, have some kind of mathematical plan in place, you know, given different scenarios, and you know, to see if it went that way, we'd have to do this. If it went that the other way, we'd have to do that. When are we going to have that meeting? Thank you.
If I can say that that's something that we'll be producing, well, we'll be looking at the Strategy and Resources Committee meeting on the 15th of September. I did send out an initial annual prediction. It's not really a prediction, but something that we thought might be helpful in terms of people and councillors being able to see the amount of furlough we were receiving, and how we were dealing with that, and also what we thought our expenditure may be. But it's going to be slightly easier now that we know there's some activity at Woodford Park Leisure Centre, and some of that at the 3G pitch as well, that will take us hopefully through the winter. But it all depends on whether there's another outbreak of COVID-19, whether there's another lockdown. I mean, I can't anticipate everything necessarily to be able to give you a full answer to that. But I think with August's figures, that might be quite helpful to us to look how we might build on that going forward.
Perhaps, Deborah, you could send the August figures when they're
What I was going to do was update the spreadsheet that had the different months on it. Ash and I have been talking about that today, but we can't put figures in until we close down the month, because you might not have the right figures then. But certainly we are planning to update that this week and send a copy out to all members so that they just see what we're thinking it might look like.
right. Okay. Councillor Dole, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Basically for Deborah, did I imagine it, or did you send out an email or some sort of communication that suggested that the bookings at the gym were very promising? Wasn't that the case?
Yeah, it's looking more promising, definitely. We haven't lost hundreds and hundreds of members.
Right, I thought it was, I don't know, 2/3 of what it was prior to the lockdown.
I don't know. I mean, but perhaps that's something you could ask Ed Whitesmith, the Leisure Services Manager, when he gives his report.
Right.
He
Okay.
is here, I think.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Well, there's no more questions there. Thank you, Deborah. We'll move on to the item 6 on the agenda, the Woodford Park Leisure Centre activities. And is Ed with us to?
I am, yeah. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Ah, yes, Ed.
Good. Sorry, I'm on my phone, so I've been saving my battery. I didn't want to run out halfway through, that's all. Very, very briefly, as you can see, my report's relatively short this time. And the very simple reason for that is I had absolutely no idea what to put in it, because for about 4 months, there wasn't too much going on. And now everything seems to have come back relatively quickly. So what I'll do is I'll quickly run through the very basic version of it and then invite questions. I'm sure there's lots of questions, to be asked. And hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those previous questions that I hope pop up as well about gym membership and things like that. So I'll run through it and then open up to questions pretty quick. So I've noted down a few bullets there of things that we worked on during lockdown. those, to be honest, are the exciting things. So the new sports hall floor, we did some decorating to the outside of the leisure centre. Generally did a lot of prep work for reopening, to be honest, and that mainly involved me keeping an eye on what the latest kind of advice was in relation to the leisure sector, and kind of trying to be as best prepared as we could, given that announcements were made at relatively short notice, to be honest, for leisure centres. On top of that, most of that kind of first 3 or 4 month period of lockdown was spent dealing with a lot of refunds, a lot of credit notes, a lot of reassuring people, I suppose. To be honest, it wasn't the most positive time, I think, for a lot of my staff. As you can imagine, a lot of them were sat at home, almost everybody was. But overall, we did, we kind of got through it. As you'll see in the second part of my report there, a lot more started to happen in early July. And that's when the government started to allow certain sports and activities to come back outside of course, although all of those came with their own individual restrictions. What I mean by that is that whilst sports like cricket were allowed to resume, the NGB for cricket in this country set their own rules, and they had to be approved by the government, and that was different for every single sport. So what we were having to do was make sure that we could provide the facilities for those sports whilst meeting with the recommended and approved guidelines from the government and the NGBs. But as it mentions there, we did start to welcome back, Woodley Cricket Club came back to play some of their games. The Woking Borough Council Bikeability guys were able to make use of the car park, which of course was really quiet. And Woodley Netball Club came back and did some outdoor training as well. Overall, of course, the big positive of that for us was finally some income after 3 or 4 months of basically zero income. And probably the biggest thing we did, which was something that we weren't planning to do, but came about quite quickly, was we converted part of our car park into an outdoor fitness area. What that allowed us to do was to run basically bring back a couple of our exercise instructors and run some very, very small group exercise classes outside for some of our gym members. To be honest, I wasn't expecting many people to take up that offer and reactivate it. But in the end, as it mentions there, we had exactly 50 people choose to reactivate their memberships. And obviously, again, that just topped up the income from those other hirers. And overall kind of kept it ticking over, I suppose. And it was ultimately, it was really nice to be able to do something positive rather than sit around waiting for an announcement that we could reopen the inside of the leisure centre. Something that's not mentioned in that period is one of the things we were really we expected and has actually happened is that everything has to be now booked for leisure. So if you want to visit the gym, you have to book. If you want to play badminton, you have to book. So what we did was we trialed out a booking system during that period as well. Because we were only working with 50 people, it enabled us to make some mistakes, learn from those pretty quickly before the big reopening, I suppose. And as we'll see at the bottom there, 27th of July is when we reopened officially inside, obviously heavily adapted. We have a lot of hoops to jump through, and rightly so. But as you can see, we've been taking badminton court bookings, 3G pitch bookings, gym bookings, running some indoor exercise classes now. 50% of our staff have returned to work, and that's probably closer to 60% now as more and more things return and more staff come back. And as I mentioned there, everything's heavily adapted. And the reason this report's quite short is because I could have made you a 10 to 15 page report about how every single activity we're running is different from what it used to be. But I suppose the real obvious things are that sports and activities have to be socially distant. There have to be limited numbers. You have to know who everybody is, and you have to have their contact details. There's sanitizer stations pretty much everywhere in this building. In my opinion, the building's cleaner than it's ever been before for obvious reasons. But all in all, the feedback from the public's been really positive. And I suppose that's the most important thing at this time. And as Deborah mentioned, the financial side of things, whilst it's almost impossible to forecast at this point, we're getting to a stage now as we approach the schools going back, where actually large parts of the business are returning.
Right.
So the other thing as well is, I'm not sure if you've all got the photos that would be on page 13. Hopefully. So rather than kind of trying to explain to you how things are working, if you can see those photos, the top right will show you the new sports hall floor, which has been well received by some of our regular badminton players, and actually might have helped people come back to play, actually, because they were keen to see what it was like. As you can see from the top left photo, we've got cleaning stations in the gym. One of the things that the leisure industry had to do was involve the customers themselves in cleaning their own equipment before and after use. So that was a big change for our members, of course, but generally it's been received quite well. The middle two photos show what we did with the car park, and as you can see, you might be able to make out the logo there on the banner. We just called it the gym. I think it was in the car park, which we got a graphic guide to just draw up a quick logo for us to make it seem a little bit more professional than ultimately people just exercising in a car park. And we painted the lines, you can see, green and black, with green signifying a space where somebody would exercise. There were obviously, those boxes were socially distant from the next box and the next box and so on. That allowed us a bit of control more than anything else. And basically we just told people where to stand, and then the instructor kind of moved around to make sure that everyone was doing what they should be doing. The bottom right picture just shows how we've spaced out some of our gym kit, and that also relates to the bottom left picture, which shows how we've temporarily moved some of our exercise equipment into a different room. That's for those of you that don't know the centre very well, that room at the bottom left is normally called the function room, and it's a multi-use room, but tends to host more meetings and kind of children's activity clubs, I suppose. Because we didn't have any of those, we were able to use the space in a more positive way, and that's been well received by people that feel particularly anxious about coming back to the gym. And we've had some really nice comments about it, actually, and whilst it doesn't look as good as the normal gym, at this point in time it was more about getting people back through the door pretty much however we could. I'm happy, like I said, I'm happy to answer some questions. I'm sure there's lots of them. I apologise, I can't actually see who's asking the questions, so I might have to rely on the chairman to kind of lead on.
I'll let you know, Ed. But thanks very much indeed for that report. Councillor Sanjari, you were first on the list with a question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that report. Do we know, with the opening of Bullmarsh Leisure Centre, what impact that will have on members? Because obviously it'll impact our income as well. Yeah, and you know, is there anything that we can do as councillors to better support Woodford Park Leisure Centre? Thank you.
The financial impact is really difficult to gauge. What I say is that we have three key parts of the business here, really. That's the gym and the exercise classes that go with it, casual sport, which involves, you know, turn up badminton players, turn up tennis players, turn up football players, whatever it might be, and then hirers. To be honest, I wasn't particularly worried, and I'm still not particularly worried about casual sport. I think that we'll keep the majority of those people. The gym was probably where I'm the most worried, simply because it's a bigger facility, it's a new facility. It's exciting for people that live in Woodley, and ultimately, if you live closer to Bullmarsh Leisure Centre than you do to Woodford Park Leisure Centre, it's very difficult to convince people that this is the place to be. What I would say, though, if there is any positive to this whole situation with lockdown, people are very reluctant to commit to long-term contracts. And what I mean by that is that we run a really flexible membership system, whereby if somebody wants to cancel, they only have to give a month's notice. And what that allows people to kind of, in the back of their minds, think is, if there is a second wave, or if I'm not happy with something for whatever reason it might be, they can leave, basically. And what a lot of I'm going to call them private leisure centres tend to do is try and tie people into long-term contracts at a cheaper rate. Now, I know how private leisure centres work, and the membership rates they offer are completely varied depending on how much you negotiate, who you are, who you know, what time of the day you want to come in, and how willing you are to sit there with a salesperson and pretend like you don't want to be a member. And I've already spoken to multiple people that have been along, and those membership prices can range from anything from £20 to £25 all the way up to £40. I would say that we will lose some people, and I have lost a couple of people already. I do tend to ask people when they cancel the reasons for cancelling. What I would say so far is, in the last few months, I'd say 95% of the people that have cancelled because of COVID-19, not because of Bournemouth Leisure Centre. And the other thing that we do have over them as well is, and I say this mainly because they're a new leisure centre at this point, we're a lot more organised and a lot more friendly than any private leisure centre will ever be. We're a lot more personal. And we know the names of everyone that walked through the door before they've walked through the door. And I'll give you an example of that. And there were two members who live, I think it's called Shellgate Walk, the little road just to the side of the leisure centre. Two of our members had been previously members at Bournemouth Leisure Centre before it got knocked down, and came over here temporarily to obviously be able to use a gym whilst they're being built. The second it reopened, they emailed me in. Their specific reason for cancelling was because they live a 30-second walk from Bournemouth Leisure Centre, and that's where they wanted to go. On their first day there, they turned up at, I think it was 5:30 in the evening, they turned up, and they couldn't get in. The staff wouldn't let them in because the gym was full and the booking system wasn't working properly. Now, they immediately came back up here. We re-signed them up. They cancelled the memberships for Bournemouth on the same day, and now they're back here again. I think ultimately it's all about personal choice, and we will lose members to Bournemouth, just like Bournemouth will lose members to us. In terms of the support, to answer your second question, the only real way the council can support the leisure centre directly is obviously investment. And I'd imagine, without looking into it too much, that that's relatively difficult to guarantee at this time.
Do you know what? I think that's a brilliant point that you made. I think we really should be making a huge fuss about the fact that this is completely, we know that so many leisure services around the country have been outsourced. I think it should be sort of a jewel in the crown as much as possible to say that Woodley Town Council funds and or subsidises such important projects and a place for the community. And I think gyms can be really, especially the bigger, snazzier ones, can be really intimidating. And if we can make that the unique selling point of Woodford Park, that it is a family, that it is a community, that it's a much more personal approach where you'll be known by your name. I think that's just such a brilliant thing to move forward with. And I'm wondering if the council could come up with a really good marketing strategy for that.
We do appreciate the point you're making there, and you are correct, and we take it very much on board. But I'm sorry, I'm very conscious that we've got a long agenda here and we need to move on. Councillor Heap, you had a question for Ed.
Yes, thank you. 50% of the centre staff has returned to work. What is the plan for the return of the rest of them, especially when furlough finishes? Thank you.
To be honest, very, very briefly with that, basically, as more and more of the centre's hirers return and more of the business returns, so will the staff. I've been trying my best to balance that as best I can. What I would say at the moment is all but one of the key staff have returned. That obviously that 50% is based on the total number of staff, not necessarily the office staff or the instructors or whatever. The majority of what is probably now 40% staff that are still at home are some of our instructors and less, sorry, how do I word this? I'm going to say less crucial staff, but I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean by that is the things they look after haven't returned yet either, I suppose is the best way to put it. September will see naturally a return of hopefully a large number of our hirers, and that just mainly coincides with the school term, to be honest. The reopening of the leisure centre fell right at the start of the school holidays, which is naturally a time for us when we run a lot of children's holiday camps. The paddling pool's open. It's a lot of casual sport, and our hirers tend to almost have a break over the summer and then return in September. Because the income and the number of people about was lower in the summer, we didn't have the need for as many staff. But now we're coming to a point where actually more's returning, and that will coincide with a larger percentage of people returning to work, basically. I would expect, hopefully, 100% of my staff to be back by the start of October.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. Thank you very much. I think the staff up there are doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Can we move on to agenda item 7 then, the parks and buildings? I presume you're going to give this report. Are you, Kevin? Kevin? Kevin, can you hear me? We can't hear you, Kevin.
Deborah, do we need to take a vote to note the report by Ed?
You can do, yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Sorry about that technical hitch. Kevin?
Can anybody hear me?
only just.
Only just.
Okay, I'll speak up. Not sure what's happening there.
Is your volume down, Kevin?
No. No.
Councillor Bragg?
Yes.
Councillor Swaddle just raised a point and asked, should we be noting the comments of the report formally? Contents of the report, sorry.
Sorry. Can we all be in agreement with that, to note the comments of that report for the Woodford Park Leisure Centre? I've got to find raised hand. Okay, I think that's carried, isn't it? Thank you. Right, Kevin.
Okay, I'll try if people can hear me. Hopefully this is okay. Woodford Park Leisure Centre, I think Ed's covered that first area there, and I think that's not to be underestimated, the amount of work that they've had to do to get that centre ready and prepared to give our customers confidence to come back, which has been a significant task, I would say. A couple of other things just to note, obviously the paddling pool has remained closed this year, which was unfortunate. There was just no way of managing that with the regulations that quite rightly been imposed in terms of social distancing and numbers that can be in a pool at one time. It just wouldn't have been feasible to manage that in a safe way at all, unfortunately. There's a note there about a roof works at Woodford Park Leisure Centre. There's an ongoing situation there which will be reported fully at the Strategy and Resources Committee meeting, because that's where that particular issue has been reported. But as just to note that there are some issues still with the flat roofing area which are being resolved through a certain course of action. Moving on to Woodford Park, just to note, we have a rose garden being created in the Rotary garden immediately to the back of the centre here, which was an initiative from Rotary to provide memorial rose shrubs for people to remember a loved one. They can have a plaque on a sleeper similar to the Garden of Remembrance. So Terry's team have been working on that, and that should be planted up soon. I believe Terry can, who I think is still here, can offer some more information on that perhaps. Tree works, we've got some tree works to carry out on the poplars along the tree line with St Dominic's School down in that Garden of Remembrance area of the park. That is scheduled in for the October half term. at the moment. We've had that arranged this week with the tree surgeon to avoid the school term time, obviously, and we're keeping an eye on them in the meantime. There's nothing imminently dangerous to anybody, but we have identified those as trees that could do with some work, certainly sooner rather than later. And there's budget for that within the existing tree budget for the year. The Bowls Green, very quiet, obviously, for the Bowls Club. What we did manage to do was keep the green ticking over and in good condition, and also Terry's team prepared 3 of the rinks for practice sessions, so that the club, at the club's request, so that at least they could continue to do that. We've had some new goalposts installed, which Ed sourced funding through the Football Foundation for. There is, over the page on page 16, is an update from the Friends of Woodford Park group, who've been carrying on regardless through this whole period, and have kept the beds in good condition, etc. Play areas. The play areas reopened to the public on the 4th of July with a number of restrictions, which were essentially those of social distancing and some required signage. We managed to coordinate that with the Borough Council in terms of a consistent message and dates for that to reopen. Obviously, that was a bigger job for them. They had a lot more play areas and some more complicated than ours. But we did manage to get all of ours open on that day with some advance warning and with appropriate signage, etc., in place, which was good. Malone Park transfer. Just to note that that hasn't happened yet. We're waiting and working with Borough Council in relation to the actual transfer paperwork for that, the documentation. So that's imminent, I believe, but I don't know exactly when. And obviously, we'll report that as soon as that happens. Allotments has been incredibly busy through the whole lockdown period, which has had its own challenges. But overall, some really good positives. Occupancy is at 100%, and we've got the biggest waiting list we've had for many years, certainly longer than since before I was here. We've got around 70 people on the waiting list at the moment, which is good in some ways. It means there's more pressure, so to speak, for turnover of plots that aren't being kept up to scratch and things like that. But actually, more plots are in good condition up there, I would say, at the moment than ever as well. It does look good up there, and it's been very busy. We had skips over the bank holiday weekend, which we would normally do. There's a lot of rubbish up there. More people means more of the downside as well. So we did that slightly later than we've done in previous years, where we've done it over the May bank holiday, but we were in the middle of the lockdown period, so it's happened over the August bank holiday. Roadways is scheduled for next weekend, which is, as in previous years, a working party of allotment tenants, volunteers, who basically shore up the roadways is a slightly grand term for it, but they compact the stone around the site and try and get it back as good as it can be for the following year. And that's something that they've been willing to do and do a really good job on, actually. They've even sourced their own materials this year for free, which is even better. So that's great. And just to note, the Bees project, which is a kind of glimmer of good news in a long period of not a lot, which is that's gone really well, and we've got more beehives up there than we thought we were going to have. We were looking at a couple by May, and actually we've got 11 there now, and it's all working really well. It's very well organised and run. The Tenants Committee have some qualified volunteers who are managing that and keeping an eye on it, and we have an application system, so you can't just pitch up and have a beehive. You've got to be a member of the association, you've got to have a training certificate, and you've got to know what you're doing. And actually that's been working really well, so we're really pleased with that. And honey is being produced and sold somewhere probably, but that's a really good story for that site. Environmental and wildlife, Appendix B on page 17 is largely the same as previously, to be honest. There's a lot of things that haven't moved forward through the lockdown period. I think probably the key one is the one I just mentioned, which has moved on. These are items for information and for us to sort of add to and consider, and they're things that Terry's team are looking at and work through, and things that we can tie in with other things we're now looking at in more detail, like our climate emergency plan and environmental policy, and seeing how we can bring some of those along. So what I would hope is that this does move forward quite a bit by the next meeting, now that things are back in full swing, or at least almost. And just at the end there, community halls, bookings have obviously been very quiet there. What we have got, thankfully, is the dance school at Chapel Hall, which is the main income source, frankly, for that building, are able to come back. And what we've said with them is we're getting a broadband connection put in with Wi-Fi, which is going to enable them to run classes partly in person and partly using a forum like this, which means they can keep their membership up, still deliver the classes, and still hire our venue and pay us some money, which is really good news. So we're glad that they're coming back. Bookings in the halls generally have been quiet. We have taken the opportunity to carry out works in the halls while they've been empty, and they are ready for us to welcome people back, as we've done with the Oakwood Centre, and as Ed explained at the Leisure Centre. We've got hand sanitizer stations, we've got appropriate signage, we've changed our publicity and information about maximum numbers and things like that, which will obviously change with the guidance, but we basically just want to be as ready as we can be to get people back in. We have got some bookings come back in, but obviously it's the social stuff that's not back, which is going to be a while, I think.
Thank you for that, Kevin. I noticed we have David Probbins from the Friends of Woodford Park as an attendee. Did he want to add anything to his report before I open for questions?
No, I don't think so, David. No, Kevin summed it up there, and the summary is in the notes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So I'll open it for questions. Councillor Doyle, you were the first to raise your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to mention to Kevin, and he may be aware of this, it's just that I've been spending a lot of time in the park this last few days with my grandchildren. There are a lot of rats coming out of the lake. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, it's an ongoing problem, and someone did alert me to it again today, actually.
There was half a dozen of them yesterday.
Yeah, it is an ongoing one. We have got bait stations around the area there. We do try and keep on top of them, and we've got some of the residents in Farriers Close are very helpful and tend to let me know when they get more than usual in the back garden. But actually, it is quite useful.
That sounds like Farriers Close.
It's useful information, because you know, people do let us know. So yes, we're aware that there are quite a lot down there.
Yeah, they are particularly brazen little buggers as well.
They are.
Councillor Doyle, can I just add to that? I know the ground staff, where the weather has been so good and there's been so many picnics in the park, a lot of people picnicking have been leaving their food on the ground, which doesn't actually help the rat problem.
No, I think the largest problem is feeding the ducks. A lot of the bread goes on the ground near the edge of the lake. And the rats have taken up residence underneath the, you know, in the lake itself. And the problem is that I was stood there within inches of them. They were all coming out and eating the bread.
Yeah, we know the problem's there, and I know Kevin and the team are working on it. Councillor Baker, you had a question.
Yes, Kevin, so it's a three-part. First of all, the bees project is fantastic. Can we get Anushka to work up a press release on that? we really should be banging the drum, not just from the town council perspective, but also the allotments holders and the beekeepers themselves, and maybe even offer to sell the honey through the Oakwood Centre. Secondly, similar vein, the environmental wildlife initiatives on Appendix B. So that's a very good summary. I don't recall ever seeing that before. So please keep it coming. And again, I think that ought to be worked up by Anushka for some sort of suitable press release. Clearly, it needs to be phased. You don't want to put two of them out at the same time. And then my third comment, or it's a question, the broadband line for Chapel Hall, who's paying for that? Are we factoring that into the existing cost? Are we anticipating adding it to the future or whatever? What's the plan?
Initially, the dance school who requested it are paying for it, which is great. That said, it was something that was in the plan for both halls going forward at some point. So we were thinking about it, because in this day and age, it's a reasonable thing to expect a hireable venue that there might be a Wi-Fi connection. We weren't at that point of actually doing it, and we were obviously at the moment with hirers and bookings being the way they are, it's not a necessity. So the conversation we'd had with them was, yes, we can do it, and they said we'll pay for it. So that's what we've got at the moment.
Right. Councillor Heap, you had a question.
Thank you. Yeah, on the allotments, I was going to ask, did we get some new keys? Were we going to get new keys?
Not yet.
Has that been done?
No, it was intended to be an idea.
Can't hear you.
You've gone.
Lost sound again. Can you hear me now?
Bit.
Yeah, you're very soft, Kevin.
Okay. And the other point, I noticed in Malone and Weeble, they've cut grass right up to the edge. I'm thinking, certainly to assist the wildlife, is there a possibility that we could leave a margin on the edges? There is advantages to wildlife to have different height of grass, and there's not really a need, I don't think, right at the edges to cut the grass. So I just wonder whether that would be considered.
Councillor Heap, if I can answer that, I've actually, sorry about that, I've actually been round the park and raised this point exactly with him. Woodford Park, they're already doing it. If you walk around Woodford Park, you'll see about 2-metre gaps where they're not cutting the grass, allow wildflowers, etc., to come up.
Yeah.
When you look at other parks, such as Malone Park, there isn't the space to leave that gap, purely and simply because you get nettles, brambles, and what have you grow up in there, and the children run into it and get scratched or
I don't really think they go to the edges, right by the fences.
In places like Malone Park, they do, because the space is not very wide. They do run around, they go right up to the edges in Malone Park. And if they left 2 meters, there is the danger of us being attacked by parents whose child has been stung in the bushes or gone into brambles. So certainly the grounds team are doing what they can, and they are doing it if it's safe to do so.
Well, getting stung by nettles was part of my childhood.
Unfortunately, nowadays it isn't. Times have changed, I'm afraid. But I hope that answers the question for you.
Thank you. Oh, is there any chance of visiting the allotments?
Yep. Yes.
Good.
Yep. Right then, if we can all raise our hands to note the contents of that report, I'd be grateful. Better raise my own hand if I can find it. Right. Thank you. That's carried. Going on to Town 8, the town centre tree garden. I presume, Kevin, you're giving this as well.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
You're very, very soft, but I can
Right,
hear you.
I'll shout. There's some background there, which some of you will be aware of. The walled garden in the town centre has now was constructed in March by Woking Borough Council as a solution to the problem of uneven paving causing a trip hazard for residents. So that is in place, and what we've been looking for is suggestions from residents and consulting with them about what they might like to see in there and how that would work. In Appendix A, you can see basically a list of suggestions there. A lot of them very similar and not particularly controversial. There's a lot of suggestions there about wildflowers or about just evergreen shrubs, and some of the other comments that I've had have been largely around just concerns about litter and things like that, which is just one of those issues that we would have to deal with regardless. There are some considerations, some limitations that I've mentioned there, some to do with the soil depth, which is not a lot. It is partly in shade, which can limit what you might do also. And there is no water supply directly to the site. So that is another consideration about what we might want to actually do there. But there are also some opportunities. It is a focal point. A lot of people use it. We've had a lot of good comments as well about it being there. And you quite often see people using it as an area to sit and do whatever. And there are some opportunities there in terms of our choices in planting to do something that fits with our environmental policy and some of the other things we've been trying to do with biodiversity and things like that. So some of those suggestions, particularly those around things like wildflowers and things that encourage pollinators and things like that, I think the public seem to think that way more than perhaps was the case a few years ago, and we've had quite a lot of comments along those lines as well. Also, I think probably one of the things to think about in terms of what actually happens in the garden is that it's not necessarily a permanent thing. It's something that we can do, we can try, we can, in the same way that we do with other park areas, we can, it's something that can develop, and the community side of it particularly, as people, may want to become involved or want to do something else, and we can continue to look for opportunities for that. We can include those in there as well. One thing just to note, I've also had in the last few days a very nice email from Rotary who asked if we would like them to plant crocuses in there as well, as they've done in Woodford Park, and they involve volunteers and things like that, and whether an area of the garden could be used for that. So there are those sorts of options and sort of mixes of use. So I think there's probably a couple of things to consider. One is to get something in there, to get it being used, and the other is continuing to look for opportunities for it to be used for other things as we go forwards, and we don't really need to rule sort of those things out, I think. We've had some advice. I've spoken to various people, the horticultural chap at Woking Borough Council. I've spoken with a colleague at the Royal Parks in London about it, and the sorts of things we could do. And they've been the same sorts of things in terms of what's likely to grow or work well in that area. Those being sort of evergreen shrubs or something on the wildflowers side. Alternatively, something that's just dry grasses and gravel or something like that. So there are some options. All of those options have pluses and minuses in terms of cost ongoing maintenance, and ultimately what people might like to see. So there are some options there. I have had quite a few offers of assistance just from individuals who've said, actually, I really like it. Can I be involved? I live nearby. I'll be happy to come and help. So ongoing, there's already a feeling of people wanting to be involved and help with it. It's just getting something that they can be involved with, I think, at this point, and getting it started. So there's lots of questions around that. I realise that, and it's something that's been talked about quite a bit in various instances. So that's kind of it, really, I think, in terms of what I can offer up. And as I said, I think the way to think of it is perhaps that it's not a be-all and end-all that we do now, but actually there's some options, some really good and positive things we could do with it now, and we can develop it going forward.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Swaddle, you've got your hand raised. You have a question? Councillor Swaddle? You've gone mute as well, Alison.
No, I was apologising for, I think my hand up was from the vote on the last thing.
Okay. Councillor Baker, you had your hand up also.
Thank you. Yes, presumably the planting options aren't either or. We could do a mixture because the area is quite large, and I assume probably the simplest and easiest to get it planted quickly would be the wildflower seeds. So I'd be interested in your comment on that. So from my perspective, on that basis, I would go down initially the wildflower seed mix, and then have a sort of a more detailed planting plan of other alternatives. So like half of it is wildflower seed mix, half of it is the gravel garden or something like that. And then my final point is, I believe it's absolutely essential to get community involvement. One of the blocks for us getting a higher grade in Britain in Bloom for the town centre is the lack of community involvement in the town centre. And this is the opportunity to do that. So for me, it's very, very critical that we get some form of community involvement, because that will aid us going from our current level to a higher level.
Councillor Heap.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not an expert, but whatever we pick, it's got to survive. We can't just put things in which are pretty and then just die. So, and I'm not an expert of what is going to survive. It's been suggested to me that desert-type plants, slow-growing shrubs, and herbs and lavender. I'd like smelly plants so that the blind people can appreciate the garden as well as the sighted. Is there any possibility of breaking up the pan underneath that 6 inches of soil so the roots can get down further? And obviously the wall itself forms quite a good seat for a lot of people, but old people, it's obviously too low. So if we are going to have seating, you'll have to have some which are higher, because they just can't get back up when they sit down. So for old people, if you are going to have seating, it needs to be higher than that wall. That's my view. Thank you.
Councillor Sanjari.
Sorry, my hand was just, my hand was still on there from the previous vote. I thought it would be removed. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dole. Did you have a question, or is your hand still raised?
I have 2 points I'd like to make. The first one is, I'm not sure what Councillor Baker's expertise is in growing stuff and gardens, but we do employ a lot of people in terms of ground staff and so on. And I think it would be a jolly good idea if they could come up with some, shall we say, a short list of things that are appropriate for that sort of space, because they're obviously the sort of people that have that expertise. And I think that would be very helpful for us councillors to make a decision. And they can, you know, whilst they come up with a short list, tell us why it's a short list and you know, how our community and the council will benefit from it. The second point that I'd like to make is that I'm sure Deborah doesn't realise it, but her she's not muted when everybody else is speaking. And what you're doing, Deborah, is you're turning pages over.
Oh, sorry.
It's
Sorry
making
about
a
that.
hell of a racket. I know you're not aware. I'm just making, you know.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Cheers.
Right. Did you answer that, Kevin?
Not really. Very good point. That's helpful. I think what we've got at the moment, and if that's what you're asking, this is kind of a short list in so much as there's some options there about the type of thing. But I think what you're asking is for something a bit more specific, which is I think we should do this, and these are the reasons why. Which would be
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I also think, Martin, is that a lot of those options on there actually came from the staff as well. But anyway, can we then please note the contents of the report? And that also... Thank you. Finally, can we also note that we have considered the planting options for the walled garden?
Chairman, can I just interject?
Yes.
Just that there's been several suggestions. You know, I've made one, Martin's made one, etc. Rather than this recommendation that we've considered the planting options, surely we should replace that with what we've asked Kevin to do with the grounds maintenance.
Yep, no, I take that point. Thank you. So we won't go there. Now, we're only
Sorry, Chairman. Could we get Kevin to replay back what he's heard from the councillors, and we ought to vote for that and get it in the record, ready for when we come back.
Okay, can you recount that, Kevin?
Sorry, now, do you mean?
What, to actually make a short list of plants from that that are going to meet the various options, such as the smell for the blind people, etc., etc.
Yeah, Linda, do you have?
If we could arrange for Terry, and I don't know whether David could join in at all from the Friends of Woodford Park with some suggestions, and we come up with a short list. Okay. If everyone's
you
in
don't want me to read out the short list now? I mean, it'll be in the minutes. Is that what you want?
No, I don't want the short. There's a list in the minutes of the recommendations that have come through. What has been suggested is that we now reduce that to a short list of plants for the committee to agree, so that the project can proceed. Okay, to give a variety of colour, smell, etc.
Yeah, sorry. Did you want me to read out the suggestions that have been made now for a vote now? Is that sorry, I'm not.
Well,
no. Okay, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So can we vote on that then, please?
What are we voting on?
Yes.
We're voting that Linda and Kevin in negotiation with possibly David Probbins from Friends of Woodford Park and with the ground staff to come up with a short list, to cut that list of plants down to a short list that we can proceed with.
But does that need a vote?
Well, I think it does, because there's lots of suggestions there that are very good, which we are trying to reduce. So if no one wants to vote for it, then we'll put it that list stands. I hear no objections from anyone. So Linda, as no one seems to have voted, we'll leave the list in force. Okay?
No, David, we have voted.
Yeah, 4.
Yeah. I can't see it on my screen. Right. Okay, I mean, that is carried. Thank you.
Chair, David,
Yes.
it's David here. Sorry to interject. There was a recommendation also that we provide some additional seating on the wall to accommodate folk who have difficulty sitting down on the low wall. Can we also consider that as one of the options as well as planting?
Yes, I think that goes without saying.
I'm going to get the grounds maintenance team to include something in their proposal for that, please. That'd be good.
I would certainly agree with that. Thank you, Darren.
Right.
Right, we're only halfway through the meeting, and I'm aware that it's just gone 9:30. So we're going to plough on and try and get as much done before 10 o'clock. So I'm going to have to limit the number of questions asked on the future items, I'm afraid. But item 9 on the report is the equality impact assessment, which perhaps Deborah, you would like to explain to the committee?
Yeah, if I can introduce it just briefly. Earlier this year, the council agreed to extend Jack for a further year so that the council could Community Youth Partnership could carry out a survey to find out what young people in the town wanted to see provided. Because of COVID-19 and the lockdown, that meant we didn't really have the access to young people at the schools as we had hoped. But we're hoping to be able to do that once the schools reopen. The reason this has come in front of you is because some councillors have expressed, we've had conversations at various meetings about equality impact assessments, particularly on the provision of youth detached work in Woodley. And you'll see in the report that I've explained that equality impact assessments aren't required by law, but they are a way of facilitating and evidencing compliance with the public sector equality duty. Mostly equality impact assessments are used to undertake new projects or revise service provision that a council might be undertaking. I think what councillors also need to be aware of is that officers have little experience of carrying out this kind of assessment at the moment, and would require some training. I've spoken to ACL Consultancy Solutions, who are the people who have put together the tender that we were proposed to use early in January. And they've estimated a cost of £2,700 to carry out an equality impact assessment, including the cost of training officers, so that we can use that process again in the future. I'd like members to think about whether it would be reasonable to spend £2,700 on the existing contractors, which I understand some members may prefer to do. But what I've suggested in the report is that actually we include with the tender documents something that asks the tenderers to respond to a questionnaire about policies and practice of their organisation and how they meet the Equality Act requirements. And then that what we would do within the first year of operation of the new contractor is carry out an equality impact assessment. And as you'll see, I've reminded the council that we are facing severe financial difficulties this financial year. And I'd ask you to consider the recommendations set out in the report that an equality impact assessment be carried out after the appointment of a contractor who would take up the contract from the 1st of April 2021.
I see I've got two hands up here. Councillor Doyle.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of questions, Deborah.
Sure.
On the occasion that we extended the Jack contract, was it the Woodley Town Council policy to perform an equality impact assessment for that type of work?
Yes, it was.
It was, thank you very much.
It would be something that we would, yes.
Well, we all voted for it. We all put our hands up and said, yes, we want to do this.
Yeah.
So we should have done it, should we not?
I think it would have been quite difficult, Councillor Doyle, during the lockdown to carry out that kind of assessment.
No, on the evening for which I have a code of conduct complaint against me for losing my temper because we didn't do this, should we not have done an equality impact assessment? Since it was our policy, should we not have done it?
Not if we didn't have the ability to do it.
Right, so that...
And Councillor Doyle, you know full well that I said to you, I would be writing a report for this meeting to set out what the proposal would be in terms of an equality impact assessment in relation to the detached youth work in Woodley.
So if we are going to create contracts for this type of service, is it the policy of the council to complete an equality impact assessment?
It would be, but you would have to wait until someone had been in that.
Why wait a year? Why wait a year after you've appointed them to find out whether they comply with the public sector equality duty, for which we have all put our hands up? All the councils in the area, Wokingham, Reading, a lot of the councils in the local area comply with PSED. We are not doing that. And we're prevaricating and putting it off and putting it off. Now, I know that the chair is going to stop me very, very shortly. But would you say that we should have done that equality impact assessment prior to extending the Jack contract?
But we didn't.
To be honest, Councillor Doyle, the council and I personally thought this would be the responsibility of the provider of the contract.
I kept telling you that it wasn't their responsibility.
Let me finish, please. That was, I think, the conclusion of most of the committee members. Now, having had that item, we've had 8 months of more or less lockdown when it has been impossible. Should we have done it? Yes, but the time allowed after that meeting was insufficient before we went into lockdown to complete it. We're now at a situation where the contract expires in March next year, and we have undertaken to do that contract, do that impact assessment at that time. And that is what we're voting for. The council has lost a lot of income during the last 8 months because of COVID-19. And it's either spent £2,700 plus VAT now and another £2,700 plus VAT in April, or wait until April and do it on the new provider.
Right.
That is
If we're arguing about the recommendation that Deborah is making, I would like to propose that goes to full council, because I don't really think it's the place for this particular committee to make that decision. It affects every councillor. You're not complying with the law.
This
You're not
committee
complying
is
with the law.
No, that's not true, Councillor Doyle.
that proposal.
We'll see, won't we?
Okay, it comes to leisure first, and then it is sent on with a recommendation to full
You
council.
elected, you voted to comply with this legislation. You all put your hands up. Now you don't want to. And that's all you're doing. You're saying we don't want to vote or do what we voted to do.
You wish to spend 5,500 of the council's money when it only needs to be done
Totally
once.
unnecessary. I could teach you.
Well, we want professional advice, I'm afraid, Councillor Doyle. Any other questions? Councillor Heap, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I was concerned by the way this was presented on the this agenda. It didn't mention the fact that it's been policy of this council since October of last year to do this. And my view is, if it is right to do it in April 2021, then it is right to do it now. We can't wait.
Yeah,
We can't keep kicking this down the road. Now, yes, it costs money to comply with the law. It costs money for training. Once that training has been done, then we have that in the bank. That training has been done, and that can be used not only on this, but on other situations, because there will be other situations where we need to employ this information that we would have gained. And I think personally, I think we need to do, if we should be doing it in April, we should be doing it now. It's been the policy since October.
Deborah, you wanted to come back in.
Well, can I just explain that actually the council does not have to carry out an equality impact assessment. It has agreed that it will do that. And what I've proposed to you in this report is a proposal that we do that and use our money efficiently, which is to apply it to the new contractor from the 1st of April instead of the last few months of the existing one.
All right. Well, I'm going to put that to the vote, please.
That's a joke.
Well, I'm glad you find it funny, Councillor Doyle. Right, I'm going to put it to the vote, please, that members have noted the contents of the proposal that the equality impact assessment be carried out after the appointment of a contractor to provide detached youth work in the town from the 1st of April 2021. Can I see hands raised, please, in favour of that vote? That's
Sorry,
four.
did you say, sorry, can you just repeat that? After, you said after the contractor has been given the contract.
After the appointment. Sorry.
The recommendation is on page 23.
Chair, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah,
What you
that
just said.
members note the contents of the report and to propose an equality impact assessment be carried out after the appointment of a contractor to provide detached youth work in the town from the 1st of April 2021. All those in favour? I've got the hands raised. If everyone could lower their hand, please, now. And all those against? That was 4 in favour and 3 against, Linda. So that
Yeah, that's
motion.
correct. Yeah, so that's agreed.
Chairman, can I ask a question? Councillor Al-Sanjari, has she actually got the agenda? Because the recommendations is in the agenda. So I'm concerned that Councillor El Sanjari is working from no agenda, and that's not really very good.
No, I've got the agenda. I'm clicking between my phone to vote and the agenda. I just wanted to clarify what the chair read out.
Yeah. Well, that 4 votes to 3, so that is carried, Linda. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to item 10, which is the Woodford Park destination play area. And Kevin, I think you're providing that information as well. It's on page 24 of your agenda. Kevin, you've gone mute again.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'll keep this very brief. It's just to note that that project is moving on. It stalled obviously during the lockdown period when contractors were essentially shut down. So it's just a note, my intention is to get the tender pack out for that in the next week or so. And there's just a note, we took the opportunity during lockdown to get some data from park users and managed to get quite a good response, actually, 270 responses. There's a lot of comments and suggestions that go with this as well, which are going to feed into that. So we'll get that document out when we get the tenders in, with some designs that will come back for to the committee to consider, and we will do some full consultation on the designs when they come back in. So it's just for information.
Right. Has any Councillor Heap, you show hands?
Yeah, thank you. We've obviously consulted people already using the park. There obviously might be people that can't use it at the moment because their kids have various disabilities, so they can't make use of it. The further public consultation, and how will that take place?
What we did do, this is the first time I've done it this way, we used a questionnaire, and I just tried to get the wording to be as flexible as possible. So there were questions in there about, firstly, do you use the play area, you know, and how often you visit the park. In getting something similar out, we would do similar avenues. So we use the Herald to try and reach people who aren't necessarily already using the park, and to try and find out any reasons why, because I think that's quite important in terms of finding any barriers to use. I've tried to get some of that out of this one. So I think when we've got some designs to go with it and we can get that message out as widely as we can, is to have something similar, which can kind of narrow it down a bit. There are some, as I said, there's comments that aren't in this because actually they were it's quite wordy and not very interesting to read through a lot of it. But I can provide that, which is actually there's lots of comments like we love the stuff at Sol Joel Park, or we love Dinton Pastures, or you know, so some helpful things that can help us with that, and also inform the designs when we get them back. So the intention would be to do that website, our social media channels, the Herald. We will put displays in the Oakwood Centre and Woodford Park Leisure Centre, and try and canvass as much opinion as we can.
Right. Thank you, Kevin. Are there any questions? Councillor Heap, you're right. Well, we've all noted that item, and we'll move on to the maintenance depot. I see Terry was with us, but he's now left.
Yeah, he keeps dropping out. I think he's having trouble with his connection, but I can just provide a brief update.
Right. Well, again, there's not a lot for this committee to do other than to note the report. Have all councillors read item 11 on the agenda?
Yeah, read it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
The flooding that occurs when we do this building, where's that water going to go? Because you're still going to have that water going somewhere.
We've got a great big drain in.
Right, great, thanks.
All right. All right, okay, so we'll move quickly on to item 12, which is the draft emergency action plan, which is on...
Chairman, can I interject just before we go to that? Can Linda make a note, Councillor Doyle left the meeting after item 9. And can that be recorded in the minutes, please?
I have noted that. Thanks.
The draft climate emergency plan. Now, I'm not sure, Deborah, who actually prepared this. I presume it was the climate emergency party, working party.
I think Kevin's worked on it mostly.
I drafted the document, and the working party have discussed it when it met last week, and made some adjustments and amendments to it, which actually aren't in the version you've got. There were just some small amendments in terms of wording, which will be in the changed one to go to S&R. So this was for just for information.
Could Kevin speak up? I'm afraid I can't hear him.
Sorry, something wrong with this computer. I'll make that a bit shorter. The working party has met and considered this draft plan. I've made some minor amendments before it goes to strategy and resources to be approved. So it's here for information because a lot of the areas are leisure and grounds and things like that. So it is for information.
Right. Has everyone read the action plan? And, you know, is anyone, I mean, it's very straightforward. And, you know, all the current actions are in red. But does anyone have a question they want to ask? I'm seeing no hands raised. So can we accept that report as far as it is, please? Okay. 2, 4. That's okay.
Yeah. That's agreed.
Right. So we now move on to item 13 on the agenda, which is the Woodley Bowling Club. We've got, before we move on to that, we've got 3 items left on the agenda. And we're now about 3 minutes to 10. Can I take a vote to extend this meeting to 10:30, please? Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yep. So Woodley Bowling Club. Deborah, are you?
Yes. Just before, just after lockdown happened, I had a conversation with members from Woodley Bowling Club regarding their lease and ground rent charges relating to the land on which their pavilion is built, for which they pay ground rent, and the licence for the use of the bowling green. And we had a discussion about that and about the council's loss of income and their potential loss of a bowling green. And I don't mean that as a threat, but actually we've still had to do quite a lot of work on the bowling green. And they went away and came back and proposed that they make a contribution of £4,160 towards this year's costs to the town council. The budget originally was that they would pay just over £8,000 for the additional use of the green for various things to do with county matches and other events. So this has come to you as a result of the discussions that I had with members from the bowling club.
So presumably, Deborah, you want this committee to vote on approval for accepting the 4,160?
Yeah, you need to consider
Okay.
that. I'm not. Sorry.
No.
It's okay.
Any comments that anyone has on this? I mean, if I can give a personal comment, the bowling club haven't been able to use the green for a great deal of their season. They've been unable to have any matches on the green. So at 4,160, I think that's quite a reasonable offer personally from the bowling club.
Yeah, they've got some people practicing now, but that's only just started 2 weeks ago. People who wanted to just come up.
By the end of this month.
Mm.
So, I mean, has anyone got a comment? Alex, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I don't think this is unreasonable. I mean, presumably you won't get anything if we turn them down, and I think they haven't had access to it. So, you know, but as long as we make it clear this is kind of one-off because of this unusual year. But yeah, I think we're quite lucky actually to get half the budget.
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. So, can we have a vote on that, please? To raise your hand if you're in agreement.
Okay, that's agreed.
Yeah, thank you. So you can go back to.
Should we have a vote against, David, since not all councillors voted?
Oh yes, sorry. Do we have anyone voting against that, please? If you raise your hand. Nothing's gone up. So that's carried. Right, moving quickly on to item 14. I don't know whether people have had the opportunity of reading the literature from Wokingham Borough Council about the Wokingham Cultural Strategy, where we're supposed to give comments by the 7th of September. Now, I mean, I had a look through it this morning. There are certainly some items that I would like to see raised. But personally, I think given the extent of that, it might be best if everyone on the committee actually read through and emailed Linda or Deborah with their own personal responses. And then we can look at it before the week's out. Is everyone happy with that?
Can I just say, any response will have to be agreed by the whole committee, though. If everyone's, you know, sends opposing views, it's difficult.
Do a joint email between everyone. That gives everyone on the committee the opportunity to comment, disagree, or put in any additions.
Okay.
Chairman, can I propose an alternative that individual councillors submit their comments? Because frankly, you know, 6 days is not enough time to have that dialogue. You know, if you send it around by email, you know, you cannot assume if somebody doesn't respond, they agree with that comment. And I think it would be unfair to have what it will in essence be a Woodley Town Council view without a proper debate. So
Right.
I would propose individuals directly send their comment, maybe copy to Linda so we know what has happened, but not committing the Town Council in that way.
Well, I mean, I would be quite happy with that if other councillors are happy also.
Yes, I would support Keith's suggestion.
Yeah, seems to make sense. Do we have an email address we're going to send it to?
Linda?
I can email everyone and let everybody know who to respond to.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So if everyone, you know, could put in their own ideas and then, you know, do it personally and copy in Linda so that we know what each person's ideas are. Okay. So finally, moving on to item 15, we come to the terms of reference of the working parties and subcommittees, which was the result of last week's meeting. We'll start on the Community Youth Partnership. And I mean, I'm not going to read through the whole lot. Everyone's got a copy. Any comments? Any adjustments that the people want to see, you know, to those terms of reference?
David, I would propose that we actually accept them as they are. They're quite comprehensive. They were developed by cooperation with the voluntary organisations. I know it belongs to this committee, but it is meant to be very much a voluntary led type thing. So I would propose we leave the terms of reference as is.
Yep. So the proposal is that we leave the terms of reference as they are at present. Can I have a show of hands, please? And against?
That's agreed.
Could I abstain?
Abstain, yes, certainly.
Thank you.
So there's one
Mr.
abstention.
Chair, is Councillor Nada still with us?
Councillor
Hello?
Nada. Yep.
Hello, I'm abstaining as well. Why would you say I'm not with you? What's going on?
I was concerned you had technical issues because you hadn't voted on the last couple of things. Nothing. Don't need to be paranoid. I was just wondering if you had a technical problem.
There was an accusation that I didn't have the agenda in front of me, and now is whether I'm with you. I'm with you, and I'd like to register an abstention, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Fine, that's registered. So moving on to the 3G pitch. Again, I propose that the terms of reference be as they are in front of you. And if I could have a show of hands, please, in favour. Well, there's 5 in favour. Against? Right. Okay. So that's passed. Last but not least is the Woodford Park Leisure Centre Regeneration Task and Finish Group terms of reference. And once again, I will propose that those terms be left as they are. So if I could have a show of hands, please, in favour. And are there anyone against? Or anyone abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Abstaining, okay. Right, that has been passed. So item 16 is future agenda items. Are there any items that people want to propose for future agenda? No. Okay, Linda. Item 17 then, we have the publicity and website. Are there any items other than those that have been discussed already this evening that people would like added to the website or in press release? Councillor Sanjari.
Just to push forward with the Woodford Park Leisure Centre, really to about the kind of community, local, council owned, all of that stuff. I think it really deserves a lot of praise and celebration, and to encourage recruitment for whatever we might have lost over COVID and to Bullmarsh. Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you very much. Can we arrange that, Linda, please? Because I think most of us actually agree with that, the thoughts behind that.
Okay.
So we'll get that done, Nada, Councillor Sanjari, as soon as possible. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for this, coming this evening. And I'm calling the meeting now to a halt at 10:09. Thank you. Good
Thank
night
you.
all.
Thank you. Good
Very
night.
much, David.
Well done, David.
And,
Good night, everyone.
good night.
Good night.